please stand up. We've been sitting a long time. Please stand up. For those who want to. I'm going to say Obumu. You're going to say Obumify. Obumu.
Obumify.
Ah, come on, EMP. Obumu.
Obumify.
Ah, come on. Obumu.
Obumify.
You can stand up, you can dance, you can clap, you can do whatever, but let's take a little ride.
You know, let the Obumu concept, resonate a lot with what you're talking about. Like, freestyle about re-envisioning Uganda.
Lwaki tebasobola kwatagana nga bulijjo tusobola okubeera mu bumu n'essanyu gwe oluusi ne neebuuza lwaki tetugatta mikono okulwanyisa enguzi tubeere mu mirembe nga bajjajja bwe baalugera agali ewamu geegali ennyama tubeere mu mirembe.
I just love how we all get together. Our different talents thrown on together like beautiful colors throwing out in that da. So I say one love, yeah, to all the world, yeah. Say one love, yeah, to all the world, yeah. One love, yeah, to all the world. Boomer fight, boomer fight, boomer fight, boomer fight, boomer fight. That's all I got, y'all.
Wampita nganzija ngankaliyawo ng'omubi. Hey! Sijja kulolobala kuba guno mulamwa nagutegedde wabula gwabadde gutya mukyogere Obumu bwe gwabadde.
Yadoli mukulu mu mutima gwange musula. Yadoli mukulu mu mutima gwange musula.
The sound of the night. The sound of the night. Hey, of the night. This is the sound of the night. Yeah.
Come dice le canto di Rhode Island, la maniera bella di Santiago.
Yo, tutandise okukumba n'abatuuze ekyo kyekyekiri kwesembera ekigulire gwe wekino bwe kifuba kya bulijjo be batuuze boolaba buno bwe tuyita obumu.
Said hip hop under the moonlight. Said hip hop under the moonlight. Said hip hop under the moonlight galaxy. Hip hop under the moonlight galaxy.
Hip hop under the moonlight galaxy.
Alright, yo, the cypher's still going on. Live in Stone City. Love to thank our brothers for being a part of the Obumu movement and taking it forward and planting it in their hoods. This one is for the love. This one's for the energy. This one's for the gratitude. And we're going to lead it from here all the way to around the world. Obumu!
Okay, you can sit back down. So we're going to talk about scene shifting in Uganda, which has 78% of the youth. The 78% of the population are under the age of 30 in Uganda. So just keep that framing in mind. Nearly 80% of the people who live in this country are under the age of 30 years old. So let me show you where Jonathan and I went to do this work. We want to ask the question, if hip-hop moves masses, is it a movement that a masses moves that matter? Think about that. Is it a movement that a masses moves that matter. So we need to ask the question, what matters? And we came to the point of what matters to the youth and the folks in Kampala because we were asked to go there to help create and design what they called the Obumu Media Lab. And it sprung from a series of conversations that I had with Silas, and you'll hear more from him as we get through the presentation. But this is just a sense of the work that we were doing, digital story making. But it was really about how do we construct a story? How do we get a sense of agency, identity, entrepreneurship, and leadership through media making, through cultural activism, through cultural work that would drive to business creation, education, and health activities. Now, to get to that story, I want to talk about how we got there. So Silas, in the middle, contacted me in about 2011 after he saw a film that my wife and I made, Angelica, called Mazazaki, which is a Kosa word which means to build each other through culture and the arts. And it was a film that we made with cultural activists and artists in South Africa. And he asked me if I would come to Uganda to screen the film. And I said, sure, I'd love to screen and talk about the film, but how about if we come, screen, and then make films? So then he had a fortuitous layover in Seattle. I contacted my good friend Jonathan. We actually came downstairs at the EMP, had a little walnut blueberry gorgonzola salad, which was quite nice.
That's at our cafe downstairs.
Yeah. And we hatched this idea, and out of it came the Obumu Media Lab, where we were asked to then go and do this 8-day intensive training where we had 20 youth who were involved, and these youth represented various community-based organizations within Kampala, and they came to spend a week with us so they can go back to those organizations to become the embedded storyteller within the organization. And this is where we were just up the hill here where we were doing our work, and the Luga Flow sort of sign there sort of marks where this work was taking place, at least in this particular area. And Luga Flow comes from Silas coined this phrased this coin about 10 years ago to get at indigenous hip-hop, to do hip-hop in Uganda, to do hip-hop in their language using their instruments. So it's a really interesting phenomena of Luga Flow. And how do we enter in and make stories with this community, not about the community? The idea is to make stories with. We're not there to take your photo. We're not there to get the story. We're there to develop capacity of story making so when you leave, you can continue to tell the story. And this is one of the group shots of the participants. So you can see the range. We had from 12 years old up to 22, and then I'm probably the old guy in the corner at this particular stage. It was a wonderful week of making story, making media, making music. And as you can see, we started with this notion of production, but really getting at the heart of story creation, which is how do you articulate your action idea? What is the heartbeat of the story that you want to tell? And once you establish that heartbeat, how do you then make production choices, location choices, people choices in terms of the weaving and telling of that story? We were working with media that we had. Some of it was on cell phones. Some of it was on Canon 5D cameras. Some of it was on Nikons. But we had enough sort of production gathering equipment to have people take photos. What we didn't have access to necessarily was editing equipment, but you can see there was at least 3 or 4 Macs around that table where we were able to do some editing. But we started with the establishment of what we called the 6-word memoir, where we did a set of signature photographs with the participants who ranged from folks who were doing healthcare work. We had MCs, we had B-boys, we had a whole range of different folks. And Kaz here, and I'd have Jonathan stand up, who is becoming or is an amazing fashion designer. But it's not just fashion from an apparel. This guy should be doing creative stage design at a grand level. But it's not only what he does is he thinks about multimodality and multifunctionality of clothing, jackets that turn into bags, and a range of things. The way that he thinks is on so many different modes that he's going to be amazing. So this was his 6-word memoir that he created and shared with it. Create and share to change perspectives. And what Jonathan is wearing was one of his creations. As we move from being in this particular compound or area where the foundation was located, where we were meeting, creating, sharing, we then went out to these various locations where the youth were from. And I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan, who's going to take us on another ride. And one of the main modes of transportation were these bodas. And being on the back of a boda was like being inside a video game. It was like insane. You just had to give up the ghost and the fact that you were actually going to make it there and just enjoy the few precious moments you clung to your sanities. These guys just, it was awesome.
So, yeah, it's good to be here. It's also, I'm glad we got a chance to stand up. Thanks for staying and sitting through, because it's a lot. You know, it's about, sometimes being talked at is not always as enjoyable as an audience member, so we hope we try to make this as participatory as we can as this moves along. So seeing some of these photos, one of the things about looking at sort of a trip like this is that you can sort of dive back in. There's something about the soil in Africa. Looking at that earth just takes me right back to where I was, and it feels really good. After we left some of the places, one of the things about this trip is that often there'd be some like form of transportation. We get in a van, a boat, or whatever it is, and we just go someplace. We didn't know where we were going. You know, Silas, who is the MC, he's sort of like he's kind of like a master splinter in this whole phenomenon. Everyone pretty much knows him. He would take us to particular communities, and you just had to sort of trust that wherever he was taking us was a good place to be. We ended up in this place called Ghetto. And at first, I sort of had to check the spelling of it, because what it really is, it's a slum. And when you get there and you talk to folks and you sort of come over a bridge, you know that you're in a shanty town. I mean, there's no way around that. This is one of the guys, and this is actually sort of an interesting story. So the folks, they have a lot of pride. You know, just, quite often, I don't know how to say this, sometimes people with not a lot are very prideful about what they have. You know, and these folks, they really love their slum. Ghetto, and they have their own little symbol. It's not a gang sign at all, but they're really prideful. But me and this guy had an interesting exchange, because we'd probably been there 3 or 4 days at this time, and I hadn't encountered any type of racism. Some people are hip to the fact that sometimes blacks and black Americans and Africans don't always get along, and I was sort of waiting for something, and I never experienced it. But because this was sort of like a hip-hop odyssey, when he saw me, the very first thing he says, he just throws out the N-word straight at me, and like as a huge embrace. And the first time I sort of heard it, I like sort of half heard it, but was doing other stuff, and we were working on a music video, which I'll sort of get to. And then he sort of said it again, and I remember having to stop him and say, listen, I didn't fly all the way to Africa to be called that. I could have saved the plane fare and heard that at home, you know? But it was like a warm, and on a certain level, he felt like from the music that he was listening to, that this was what people would want to be called, you know? Sort of like greeting someone who's Latino and saying, hey, SA, and it's like, what does that mean? You're like, oh, I don't know, they just say it in the movies, you know? And it's sort of a similar like that. He was surprised at my reaction, and I was sort of surprised at his, but we got through it. Wherever we went, there was always some type of a spontaneous, like, hip-hop proselytizing and hip-hop, always like some form of an instantaneous music video that would just come up. The two guys that are off to the right that are smiling, that's Spider, who's amazing, and Taye. These guys are hip-hop organizers. So what Silas does, who's the guy with the lock, so you'll see throughout these photos, is he, on a certain level, is just working with young people who have a good energy about them and want to organize. And these guys this is their slum. They're based they do a lot of their work in Ghetto. And there was a little bit of a rift, because apparently we were supposed to have been there the day before. We didn't know that. We didn't show up because we didn't know we were supposed to be there. But of all these young guys in this crew, they didn't necessarily believe that Spider and Taye actually knew who Silas was, because Silas, who goes by the name Babaluku, is someone you can see on TV. He's like a rapper. And they kept saying, okay, so he's coming. Babaluku's coming on, Friday, and it was really Saturday. So at first, all these other guys, they're kind of pissed off at these two dudes, because they showed up thinking that he was going to come, and then they're like, see, we knew you didn't know that guy in the first place. They thought they were jiving. Then the next day, we show up, and it was like very gratifying that Babaluku actually does come up, and it's a real win moment for these guys, because everyone thought they were kind of just talking shit, and then the artist that everyone knows really did come up and kind of affirm them. One of this particular photo really spoke to me, because this is an MC. Her name is Flower. And when you look at hip-hop, a lot of the times it's mostly driven by men. And that is something that is a phenomenon around the world, even when sometimes women might be twice as better. There's just more men that are practicing. And Flower is 12 years old and amazing. And She was not in school at the time because she didn't have the school fees. And quite often in other countries, sometimes you have to pay to go to school, even if the school is crap. You still have to pay. And so she was not in school at the time, and so her schooling was just through music and vocation and all that. But this photo really spoke to me because all these guys are ciphers. She could eat all these guys up. She could battle all these guys at the same time and just eat all of them. But on a certain level, it's also very isolating to be a young woman pursuing this form of music in Uganda. We also found that there's actually a lot more hip-hop in Uganda than we would have ever anticipated. There's always stereotypes, but having met Silas here at EMP, and he's saying, come to Uganda. It's like, all right, and he does hip-hop, so we'll figure we'll connect with some folks who do hip-hop. But everywhere we went, it seemed like there was just hip-hop. This here is Silas, who again goes by the name Babaluku. And I won't say that he takes advantages of the moment, but there's like this thing that Scott always says, which is like ABC, which is always be collecting. And so wherever he goes, he's making it a music video, no matter what, because you never know where that footage is going to turn into. So, yeah, there's just a lot. And no matter what we did, no matter where we went, there was always just a lot of fun being had and a lot of people just sort of gathering in and just making the most of it. And another thing that I didn't quite expect, everyone has these sort of expectations, what you think it might be, and then there's what it really is. Even in the shanty town where they have all their little, they have all their, like, again, it's really prideful. I get to, they have all their little sayings on the wall. This, which looks just like the shack that it really is, there's actually a little bit of commerce going inside. They are making a form of, they're charging folks. How they're making some money is that they do video game sort of tournaments inside. Not just tournaments, but anyone that wants to play. They got a PlayStation, they got an Xbox, they got whatever. They might even have a Nintendo. Doesn't matter. They're charging 500 shillings or whatever for someone to just play. So they're just taking whatever gaming device that they have and some TVs, hooking them up, and then all the kids that want to go in there that want to play have to pay to do it. It's just a form of like ghetto commerce. People just making the most out of what they have. And it's actually really popular. But no matter what, there's always a lot of fun that can come out of it. One of the things that I didn't actually find out until last night, I think it was, again, we were doing it like this Obumu Media Lab and expecting and hoping that folks who are participating would be walking more toward doing more stuff with digital media. Comes to find out that Taye and Spider, who are like the organizers of the hip-hop cats in this crew, had actually started a Facebook page for iGhetto. I've actually never heard of a slum that has its own Facebook page. But after being in the Obumu Media Lab for about 3 days or so, he started a Facebook page. I didn't know. I actually was just double-checking on the spelling of iGhetto, and this is the first thing that popped up in my Google search. So that was pretty cool. Mobility. Yeah. So there's that. People getting around however they can. It's Africa. It's folks being creative. It's Africa. Leaving that particular space, because there's a lot of different places that we would go. After leaving iGhetto, we actually made it to another place called Kawempe. And a part of this, and a part of this that what may need to come out, what's worth discussing, is that people were coming to us every day for about a week or so. Folks were coming from different communities to where we were based at Silas's sort of compound doing these digital media workshops. I led a hip-hop journalism workshop. I led a transmedia workshop. Scott was doing video and workshops and photography, and we did some deep hanging out and a bunch of exercise and had fun, and we ate lunch. It was great. And we're the folks flying in from North America. And so people were coming, traveling. Sometimes we would have to give people transportation fare to get home. They were coming in, they'd say, I'll come, but if you could help me get home. And of course, we know we had it, so it is what it is. But I think people really appreciated when we actually went to them and where they're based. Esther right here is an amazing photographer. She was also a part of this Obumu Media Lab that we had. And this is her world. So it's like different representatives would show up. She's a photographer for this crew called Galaxy. And what it is that they do is they're a b-boy crew. But where they dance at is this crazy bombed out structure. Everyone plays soccer. There's like a boxing compound there. Places where you would not expect youth programs to take place, but these kids are breaking left and right, and they're just having a lot of fun there. And it's meant to be more educational. This isn't necessarily simply about recreation, but keeping in mind what Scott said, that the population is so young. On a certain level, there's an argument. Is it a benefit to have such a young population in Africa? You have things like El-Shabaab and folks that don't necessarily have good things to do that are migrating toward negative stuff. The population of Africa is young in general. And I think this on the social justice side is the other side of that, where people are gathering and actually trying to do positive stuff with their life, because so many folks in the population are young. And so these are a lot of these are shots that Esther would have taken, but it just sort of shows that creative energy. And Scott and I were talking about trying to get those guys to sort of do some murals up on their wall. But these crew, they also have a Facebook page, and they're also starting to play more in that space. And they would often ask us, like, what can we do to get more visibility? Because we were there, people often looked at us as the experts, when we had just as much to learn from them as, arguably, we had more to learn from them than they had to learn from us. But we shared what we could. And Silas, who takes every opportunity to talk about hip-hop purism, he's always, because hip-hop is still relatively new, he wants everyone there to understand the culture of it, that it's not about rapping about blank and blank, but it's about self-expression, it's about knowledge of self, it's about actually being true to yourself. And so everywhere he goes, he's always making sure all the young folks know that, so that if they've met him, they get a lecture, and again, he's the son of a preacher, so that's always going to come out. Try to do the same thing. Not the son of a preacher like those two, but no matter where we went, we shared what we could with the folks who were on hand and just showed them as much love as we could. Now, the next place that we went is called Stone City, which is about a 2-hour ride, and it's funky because it's actually right at the beginning of where the Nile River is, which many people would consider to be the source of life. And so once you get to Jinja, which for Jinja sort of translates to stone, so they call it Stone City, which is, you have to take about a 2-hour ride in that little stretch of water. That's the Nile. You're going to get into even more b-boy crews, but we've lost a little bit more of the concrete. We're now on grass. So these folks have less resources, but the culture is still really strong. And beyond, because we're just going to fly through a couple more of these photos, this is hip-hop under the mango trees. This is hip-hop under banana trees. So they're off the concrete. They're off any of the extra frills that might come with hip-hop. I mean, you think about rap folks. You think about somebody's writer. You don't know all the things that may come with, like, rap in 2014. They don't need any of that. All they need is a stretch of land, and they're good, So I might just push through some of these photos, and maybe we should just use the time to just open up and see if anyone has questions.
Let's do it.
Keep going through. I want to bring us back to the foundation, and then we can take a question.
Come on up.
But I want to frame a little bit of what the work went on, because, again, we do run a graduate program in communication leadership where we look at digital media, we look at engagement strategies, we look at how we analyze and know what we're doing is a return on our investment, and it's our personal investment really into social capital. But there were 2 books that we really used that helped set the context of this, and I want to give a shout out to the authors because they donated books for us to bring, and one of the authors is actually taking photos because we practice what we preach and always be collecting. Hanson Hossein with his book Storyteller Uprising, and Rob Salkowitz with his book Young World Rising, this idea of entrepreneurship and media making, and where this cultural activism and this cultural work and development actually need to work and be more tightly coupled. But this brings us back to sort of the last group shot, and I don't know if you want to give any wrap on that.
Just miss these dudes, miss the whole crew. What really came from this, and more so than even being in that space, is the ways in which this has moved like sort of across the water. Because sometimes when you go to a conference, that's where it stays. You're at a conference for 3 days, and some of y'all are here for the weekend. You make connections, and sometimes that's just where it stays. We're a month and a half out, and we're communicating with these guys every day. Every day they're posting something on our Facebook page. And on a certain level, on a metaphorical level, because sometimes it does get annoying, because they're posting stuff all the time on our Facebook page, and it says with, they're just the with, but they mean it, So if they're in the studio with such and such, and they mean it, and so on, and sometimes I have to be like, I got to hide this from my timeline. Why are you photobombing my timeline? But there's a lot of connections that can come from that, and that's pretty rare when you have those type of experiences, which speaks on a certain level to how much we were able to work together with these youth, but also the hunger that they had. They were so happy. They were so happy to be listened to. Some of the work that we do here at EMP, we were talking about how sometimes groups are very happy to be listened to. It really blows people away when someone who they think is at a place of authority really listens earnestly to them. And so some of that has been really happening since we left, which really is pushing a lot of this.
And as we get to the question, one of the things Jonathan is working on now is he's actually doing an independent study where he's taking this work and putting a curricular package and a white paper together that articulates how this may be taken up and used and then introduced and customized in other settings.
All right, guys, that's it. Thank you very much for coming out.
Thank you.